with Chris Iverson and Victor Vigiani.
Welcome to NFN, the New Frontier Network, where we explore the new frontiers of phenomenology, ufology, and exopolitics. With us today, as always, he is Victor Vigiani.
And that is Chris Iverson. Great to be with you, Chris.
Great to be with you again, Victor. So happy to be here. We have with us as well our correspondents and panelists from around the world who will be joining in with us. We have from South Africa, we have Manuel Lameroy. We have from the United States and Peru, Giorgio Pacenza. We have with us from Portugal, Francisco Mirao Correa. And joining us today as a special guest panelist correspondent from Phoenix is Rebecca Hardcastle-Wright.
Yeah, it's great to have this kind of diversity on a panel. I don't think this type of situation, at least from some of the podcasts that I've seen, Chris, I think we're breaking new grounds here with the New Frontier Network and having this huge array of perspectives from all over the world. And as you outlined, exopolitics and the kind of things we're doing globally really are advancing this whole situation in a way that we never expected years ago. So to have a panel of these kinds of experts with us today is not only enlightening, but I think it's a podcast first. So with that, because Rebecca is a first-time panelist, I could read just a very brief bio on Rebecca. Rebecca Hardcastle-Wright. She has a PhD, is an author, futurist, and the founder of the Institute for Exoconsciousness. She is a leading researcher in the psychological and future of ET and multidimensional experiencers. As a therapist, lifelong contactee, and exoconsciousness coach, Rebecca's work centers on assisting experiencers to integrate and apply their long-term contact. Her most recent book, Exoconsciousness: Humans Claiming Psychic Intelligence in a Transhuman World, focuses on preserving and advancing carbon-based human consciousness. And also, as a member of the Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell's Quantrek International Science Team, Rebecca has integrated zero-point energy and consciousness and the ET presence. So welcome to you, Rebecca, and great to have you with us.
That's wonderful. I mean, what this highlights is the different approach that we're taking here at NFN, where we don't want to cover the ground that everybody has covered previously. We don't necessarily want to be discussing sightings that have been reported from 75 years ago, or even, for the most part, even recent sightings. We want to talk about with the people who have the experience, with the people who have been researching, with the people who are out there living this on a daily basis, where they are and what their thoughts are concerning their experiences. We have had a great deal of people on here, and we have many more guests planned going out here into the future. And I think we're finding a nice combination of researchers and experiencers in the field. There's much to be looked at. There's much to be discussed. It's more than just seeing lights in the sky. It's more than even trace elements that are being found. Much of what we're finding, and we'll be discussing today with our very special guests, is what this means to the people who are interacting with, interfacing with, and are going through these very real experiences. We have people's consciousnesses that are being influenced. They are finding ways to communicate and are being communicated with entities, whether those are here with us on Earth or even from another dimension. We are finding people who have a regular ability to do this. We have people who have, unfortunately, suppressed what is going on with it. But there's much that we're going to find and much that we're going to discover as we move forward. And as we've indicated, we want to be at the frontiers. We want to be at the edge of the discussion and lead the discussion going forward into all of these fields. As we said, phenomenology, ufology, and exopolitics, how all of these things tie together, how they relate to the people that are going through it, and what does it mean for all of humankind as we move forward.
Now, that's a good point, Chris, because I think we all need to think about, what's coming tomorrow and how the general public is in a position right now to really not be totally aware of the whole phenomenon of an ET presence. That's one thing. But even more so with respect to non-human intelligence communicating with and contacting with our species. That's something that I don't know if the mainstream media and even just the general public are conscious of or aware of. So I think that's a very good point you make. We need to bring this forward to allow it to enter into the mainstream, and we can't do it any better than we have today with our guest, Kathleen Marden. So with that, I'll read a brief introduction again for Kathleen. I think you'll all be impressed by this. Kathleen is a historian and investigator of UFOs and contact with non-humans, the author of several books, a featured on-camera commentator, and an international lecturer. She has earned a BA degree in social work and was employed as an educator and education services coordinator while attending graduate school. Kathleen is also qualified as a practitioner of regression hypnosis and the quantum healing hypnosis technique. She has worked on 3 social work projects with nearly 5,000 experiencers. That's quite impressive. Okay, since 1990, she has worked to uncover the truth about UFOs, their occupants, the humans that they interact with, and as well, U.S. government documents that involve the UFO problem. So, welcome, Kathleen Marden. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you again.
Yeah, I'd like to just start off the top, Kathleen, is you've been examining this phenomenon for so long, for many, many years. In the beginning, I guess I want to ask you, what sort of convinced you or compelled you to take this phenomenon seriously? And was the Betty and Barney Hill incident sort of a factor in you coming forward to begin your intense research on this?
The Betty and Barney Hill incident was definitely a factor. I was 13 when it happened, and I had the opportunity to meet many of the researchers who came to investigate and to speak with my aunt and uncle, beginning with Walter Webb, astronomer at the Hayden Planetarium in Boston, Massachusetts, Alan Hynek, who worked on the satellite program out of the Smithsonian Astrophysics Laboratory for a while. And of course, he was with Project Blue Book. Jacques Vallée was out, met him and his wife. And I had the opportunity to observe these investigators and researchers as they did their work. And I was very impressed by it. And I, as a teenager, thought that, well, perhaps one day I would like to be able to do that. So I didn't for a very long time. I was more or less an armchair researcher, reading books and talking to people such as Dr. James Harder when he was visiting my aunt's house. Got to know some of these people and receive information directly from them. But in 1990, I guess that's the cutoff point, I became more involved in the late 80s, but really started to do the research and the investigations in 1990. So I'm happy that I did. I was so curious about so many things that my Aunt Betty Hill spoke with me about. We argued about the use and misuse of hypnosis, the characteristics. I ended up, because of that argument, receiving a small research grant, went to the University of New Hampshire during the summer months and did a research project on hypnosis and wrote a paper on that. And from there, I finally decided, well, I should see all sides of this, not just the social research, but I decided to do the training for hypnotherapy. And then beyond that, I did the quantum healing hypnosis technique training as well. So I've had a long-term interest in hypnosis and whether or not it can lead people, the strengths and the weaknesses.
Did you ever have any doubts in your mind as you moved into this to begin with about what am I getting myself into?
Sometimes, because when I was working in my professional career, I didn't let people know about my interest in UFOs. I thought that it might have an impact on my career and my credibility. I was doing writing about leading programs that I was working on. And so it was difficult for me when I decided to actually do this research seriously. I remember flying on a plane to a MUFON symposium, and I had the MUFON journal, and I was trying to cover it up so that people wouldn't see what I was reading. And, and Stanton always used to say, I'm not an apologist ufologist. And I used to think, well, I am, because here I am so concerned about my image to other people.
Right.
But I have to credit Stanton really for making me change my mind and realizing that the work that I was doing was important, that I had the research, the serious research that I was doing. Stanton and I did a lot of it together in physical archives. And, so anyone who might think that we were kooks was simply uninformed.
Right.
And that really helped to come to that decision.
Yeah, I can identify with you on that one because as a principal of an elementary school, I did a radio program up here in Toronto called Strange Days Indeed with the host Errol Bruce Knapp. And I would do the show on Sunday evenings, and it was a live to air show. And I'd go to school the next morning and do yard duty in the yard, or go to the staff room and interact with the teachers. And Victor, I heard you on the radio. You believe in what? They were completely perplexed that I would, put my career in a position like that. So I can definitely identify with that kind of feeling. Rebecca, I understand that you have a situation that you want to go over with in terms of, we got a couple of questions here about the free survey and other things that you might want to throw at Kathleen at this point.
Sure. Hi, Kathleen.
Hello, Rebecca.
I just so admired your book, Extraterrestrial Contact.
Oh, thank you.
Make sure all the listeners can go out and purchase your book and read it. It's a wonderful guidebook on contact and and managing contact. Just congratulations. It's such a gift to the experiencer community. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering whether or not you had the same feelings I did when this free survey came out. And so now you were very involved with it. I guess that's been about 7 years now since it first started, because it was 5 years. It's been a couple of years since the book. There was a real incongruency that I picked up in comparing what the free survey said with these almost 5,000 people compared to the public narrative of abduction, for example. That's been the dominant narrative throughout the world, actually. Just to cite a few things that I picked up was that in the free survey, only 5% reported having negative experiences. That means 95 had a positive experience. 70% reported positive behavioral changes, some kind of transformative changes, physical, psychological, spiritual. They neither felt coerced nor tricked, 90%. 80% said they did not participate in reproductive programs, and 90% did not regret their agreement with ETs. And this is completely incongruent with the public narrative. And it called to mind a lot of questions for me, not only the public narrative, but also those who fashioned that public narrative. What kind of experiencers were being steered to them, literally, so that they would, adopt this narrative, beginning with Bud Hopkins, John Mack, Leo Sprinkle. And I wonder how you saw this incongruency, or if you even feel it.
Well, definitely there is. And I personally like to do social research because it is unbiased. And we all have personal biases with the individuals that we work with. And oftentimes, individuals who would come to someone like me are frightened. And they're not completely certain about what has occurred, but they have read that they're being exploited, that they're being used as lab rats, that all kinds of horrible things are happening to them. I've worked with an individual who was part of an abduction experience. There were 3 people who were taken at the same time, all credible people. And she was terrified. In fact, I said to her, I don't want to work with you in hypnosis until you have worked through this trauma with a licensed therapist who can help you with emotional release. And so she did that. And through EMDR therapy, she began to remember some of what happened on the craft. And by the time she arrived at my home, and I had interviewed her for many, many hours, and we did hypnosis sessions, she had a different attitude. She realized that she had not been on a table, that the entities that she interacted with were human types, but there were other types as well on the same craft, working with other individuals, and that they were very kind, that she believed that they had known her through all lifetimes, and that they gave her information about where they came from, which was the Earth, many, many thousands of years ago, that they had the technology to leave this planet when we had an environmental collapse, and they had gone. They had found a binary star system where there was a planet that was in twilight most of the time, and they lived there, but they traveled a lot through space, and they come to our planet to check on our development and to assist in our development. So, you get that kind of story from someone who initially is traumatized. They have post-traumatic stress disorder. They think that they've been used and abused by these non-human entities. And I think that it's really important that those who are working with experiencers are as unbiased as possible. I know myself, I had an experience working in hypnosis with a major researcher, and I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I was talking about, I was lying on this table and I was being given messages of love, we love you, you're part of our family, and so on and so forth. And in hypnosis, this researcher said to me, they're lying to you. Don't believe them. And, that's not a good thing to do when somebody is in hypnosis. And here is this researcher expressing a personal bias and contradicting what I have just stated. And, this is why I think that it's so important that we do this social research where we can gain a deeper understanding. Now, in Free's study, there were many individuals who were having contact through a variety of means. It could be out of body, it could be drug induced, it could be through meditation, through channeling, and etc. MUFON did a study that I worked on, arranged, and Dr. Don C. Donderi from McGill University, now retired, was instrumental in doing phase 2 of that study. He administered the American Personality Inventory, and that was a psychological measure that was developed between him, Bud Hopkins, and Ted Davis, who was a psychiatric social worker. It was based on the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And this was developed in order to identify those individuals who had UFO abduction syndrome. So we ended up, Dr. Donderi ended up administering this to 175 of the 516. And so we were able to then identify those individuals who were closest to the target of having UFO abduction syndrome and to compare their responses to the responses of all of the experiencers who took part in the study. And most of the people who took part in the study came from MUFON. To begin with, their people from MUFON's experiencer research team said they believed that these individuals were having contact, and so they referred them to our questionnaire. What we discovered is that those who have UFO abduction syndrome have characteristics at a statistically higher rate than the overall experiencer group. They are more highly spiritual. They are psychic or telepathic. They are empathic, meaning that they have a psychic sense of being able to experience another person's emotions or the health of their body, that kind of thing. You cannot harm a person when you're empathic because you feel their pain. They view the world differently, just like the near-death experiencers and the abductees who took part in the Omega 1 and 2 studies, Dr. Kenneth Ring. And so they view themselves as being part of something greater, of being of one, or one consciousness, you might say. And we asked, would you end your experiences today if you could? And 75% of that group said they would not end their experiences. So they're not suffering as badly as the public might think. And all I can think is fear sells. And so often the media focuses on fear. I'm not saying that everybody's having a great experience. Some people do feel exploited. Some people do suffer from trauma still, and it hasn't been resolved. And that's why I encourage people to work through this. It's so important.
It's very interesting, Kathleen, your comments there about how many people would not want those experiences to end. And of course, just taking a step or three back here with your uncle and aunt might have very well have been some of the first people who went through psychotherapy and regression analysis and had this pop out during it. It's not their original intent, obviously, when they went to go see the psychotherapist that they were dealing with at the time, but came out, I believe correctly, during regression analysis that was going on at that particular time. And if I recall, it seems as though their interactions that they were able to relate to the psychotherapist were very scary, frightening, very, as you said, almost had this a PTSD, as we would refer to it today, from the experience as it was manifesting in their lives at that time. This is something that one of our other panelists, Francisco, and I were talking about not too long ago regarding regression and a way to do regression analysis. Francisco, why don't you relate
Hi,
to Kathleen?
So nice to be with you here.
Thank you. Nice
My
to be
question
here.
is, of course, your uncle and aunt, they are indeed the case study, the original case study. It was highly researched. And I remember reading in your book with Stanton Friedman that the entire process that your uncle and aunt took with Dr. Benjamin Simon took several, 1 or 2 years, I guess, right? And
6 months.
6 months only. I thought it was a little bit more. But my question is, nowadays, many people, or we encounter some people that feel that they are being subject to abduction or some kind of contact, and eventually they go after some credible, or at least the one that is available, researcher or therapist to do regression. So how easy it is to implant false memories, and how would you advise anyone that is seeking help to deal with contact? What are the signs that they eventually need to understand from the researcher that they are conducting a good hypnosis regression session?
Well, first, I think that it's very important for the person to have a specific memory. I don't work with anyone who doesn't have a specific memory of contact. The craft, observing the non-human entities, the craft being nearby, the missing time, that sort of thing. And it doesn't matter if they don't have the precise date, because we can end up having them remember the precise date. But something that I learned through the research I did at the University of New Hampshire is that it's kind of a danger if the person thinks of the hypnotherapist as being someone that they really look up to, as an authority person, because they might be familiar with that work and they might say what they believe that person wants to hear. And that is a danger. Also, it's a danger for people who ask a lot of questions. For example, if the researcher says to you, okay, now you're standing in front of the craft. Now I want you to go onto the craft. Tell me, are you going to turn left or do you turn right? This or that, this or that. That's not a good way to use hypnosis. I trained under the use of forensic hypnosis. It's the type of hypnosis that law enforcement used. It at one time was admissible in a court of law. No hypnosis is at this point. But I think that you can get the clearest idea of what actually went on. And you always want to check for somebody's suggestibility. You want to know what they've read, what they've seen. I always give a suggestion that if you're tempted to say something based upon something you've read and not something you've experienced, then you're not going to be able to speak. So, have it be based on and the experience that you have as these memories emerge. And I like to use deep trance hypnosis, like Dr. Benjamin Simon did. I don't use light hypnosis. I think that you get a pure kind of sequence of events when you're using deep trance hypnosis. And oftentimes people don't remember what they've said under hypnosis. Oh, I just spilled my glass of water. Sorry. Oftentimes people don't remember what they said when they come out of deep trance hypnosis. So I always record it, go over this with the individual. If I'm working with a couple, which I like to do, I love it when there is more than one individual, because just as Dr. Simon did, I can interview them separately. I can do the hypnosis sessions separately, and then I can compare their statements under hypnosis. So if I'm actually attempting to determine whether or not this really happened and what did happen, it's really good to have that information as well. And when I use forensic hypnosis, I only base a question on what has already been stated. So I may not be able to get information I really am looking for in that session, but then there can be other sessions in order to look more into the details. But that's not important initially. What's important is getting a really good picture of what happened overall in bringing back these memories of what the individual actually did that day. Did they go to work? What did they eat? Where did they drive to? The entire day to refresh the memories from that experience and onto the experience of finding themselves in an alien environment. So to me, that is the important way to do it without making suggestions, without relying upon what the person might have read, what the person might have seen me state or write about, but what actually happened to that individual. And if there is any emotion that comes out, any fear, it's important for me to say, you step back from this, you just look at it now. It can't harm you now. We're only bringing it forward as a curiosity. And so they will kind of separate themselves from that emotional experience, calm down. I don't want to induce additional trauma, certainly not. Mm. So a number of different techniques that are both therapeutic and are forensic.
You seem to be alluding to the fact that the whole process of regression and doing that multiple numbers of times is like peeling an onion. You go layer by layer by layer until you get to the core. Sometimes that core is disturbing, and the whole idea of the military abduction concept phenomenon, call it what you want. I know, Manuel from South Africa, you have a question about that.
Yeah, you referred to the MUFON research you had done together with Denise Stoner. What we have in the UFO community is a lot of people who come up with this narrative that there really aren't any negative abductions or experiences that have been done by non-human intelligence. All the negative ones can be traced back to Mylabs. Now, in my experience, just as yours going back 3 decades, I've only come across only a handful of Mylabs, and the few that I've come across are the rare exceptions. They don't amount to even 1% of the cases I'm aware of. I know that you and Denise came to similar results. Can you tell something about that?
Yes. So now this was in MUFON's study of 516 experiences again. Denise was part of this, Dr. Don C. Donderi, Dr. Michael Austin Melton, and Craig Lane. And so in terms of Mylab abductions, we discovered that 13% of the individuals who took part in our study stated that they had a Mylab type abduction. So we wanted to know what branch of the military these individuals were. And for the most part, the majority said that they could not identify what branch of the military it was. They only behaved as if they were military people. So that was very interesting. We had a few who said Air Force or Navy, but very, very small percentage.
Interesting that would fit in like that regarding the differing approaches and words that you hear, as you had recalled earlier, that some of the negativity that surrounds this is negativity sells, and people might focus on the few cases that have been out there. But as you described, many of the contacts that have happened, the vast majority, being approximately 75%, really don't want their experiences to discontinue. They would like to move on with them and continue on. And I think especially when you look at the familial context of the contactees' reports, that not only does it go back to the individual contactees' youth, but to others in the family, and even in a past life basis, where as previous reincarnation of their soul, that they had also had experience at that particular point in time. Mm-hmm. Now, you touched upon the Mylabs here. Something that we were discussing here with Giorgio earlier was regarding non-human contacts. So we looked at it. You made reference to one of the reports from one of your contactees that went through regression analysis, made a reference to the person that I'll use person in the word very generalized here, obviously, that was interviewing them on board the craft, came from Earth in a very distant past. So obviously related to us. But there must also be something regarding the non-human aspect of it, I'm sure that you've heard. And I know Giorgio has a keen interest in this particular area of contact experience.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, Kathleen, I was reviewing the literature of surveys. The surveys seem to indicate that we are entering like a new stage of more understanding of the agenda of these beings, the NHI. I also would like to know your opinion regarding researchers that also have contact experiences, because it came to my attention that you had some contact experiences. I'm talking about Ray Hernandez, the creator of the free survey, basically, the main promoter. He had a contact experience. Robert Hastings recently, a researcher of the atomic nuclear energy silos and UFOs, he came out of the closet and talking about this. Kevin Day, the radar operator. And this seems to me, it feels like a new stage of unfolding of this situation, combined with the point that the UFO activity seems to bridge the gap between the subject and object. So we cannot clearly distinguish basically subjective experiences from a patriarchal dominated pretension to be objective, and understand an object outside ourselves. So what do you think our role as researchers can be in continuing this line of growth? And what could the role of consciousness be regarding this situation? Can there be contactee and researchers? Can contactee researchers be more accurate, be more knowledgeable about what's going on? Could this be like a better thing to have?
Well, I think it's always important to have a group that has a variety of different researchers from different backgrounds, so that you have some people who have had their own experiences. They have greater insight into it. They may not have interacted with the same non-human entities. For example, Denise Stoner has interacted with the mantis type, insectoid type entities and greys working together. I never had that experience. I've only had kind of they're not your typical greys even. They're the kind that my aunt and uncle interacted with. My mother was taken and I was taken as well. So, but then we had other individuals such as Dr. Don Derry and Michael Austin Melton, who have not had personal experiences. So I think it's really important that we collaborate as a team, but have different backgrounds and different understanding. So that is important. But in terms of what we do, we're all interviewing and working with experiencers who, of course, have a subjective take on this. It's what they know. But we are working with hundreds at a time, not just one at a time. And we're receiving input from them on a variety of different questions that were formulated by people from on the team from a variety of different backgrounds. So I think that it's important to do that in order to achieve our goal of having more of an unbiased view of what it is, understanding that initially it comes from a subjective sense that each person has their own experience.
I absolutely agree that all sort of well-intended serious researchers can contribute to understanding the phenomenon. But I also think that contactee, abductee, experiencer researchers can get a better inkling, a better direct, like a participatory understanding that is unique, that we should also foster. I think that's why you are such an extraordinary researcher, in part because you have the experience yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't admit that for many, many years. Only within the past 5 years have I stated that, because I always fear that I will be typecast, in a sense, as an experiencer rather than a researcher. And my goal is to remain as a researcher of all of this. And, it's just a little side story that I have had some of these experiences myself, but not something that I want to focus on primarily.
I think
It
it's
certainly
important.
gives you an ability to be empathetic with the individuals that you're speaking with and interviewing and helping them go through and understand the experiences that they're having. And it certainly also gives support and credence to the familial aspect of what's going on, as you even indicated that the entities talking to, researching you, interviewing you were very similar and most likely same from a species standpoint for the ones that were interfaced with your uncle and aunt, Betty and Barney Hill, and even back further from that. Have you found that your own experiences in regards to your contact that you had, does it fall into the norms that you have seen and the data that you have seen regards to the we'll call it the typical contact that an individual goes through?
Yes, I believe that it has. I have the characteristics that other experiencers who took part in our studies have, in terms of comparing my experiences with my aunt and uncles. Initially, it seemed very much like that. But over time, I only remember having a very strong kind of electrical sensations passing through my body. I was told that they were attempting to raise my vibrational frequency by doing this. Maybe they were trying to heal me from an illness that I had. I was healed eventually from it in an alien environment after I'd had it for a number of years. But, initially I was traumatized. I thought something horrible had happened to me. But then when it came down to those memories through hypnosis, I realized that they were being very kind and seemed distressed during that time frame when I was so horrified over what was occurring.
And do you feel as though, because of the familial aspect of it, and that might be where it comes from, but that the whole subject of there are select individuals that we have who seem to be more ready for or have the ability to be connected? It sure seems like there is a difference in individuals who are out there, and perhaps it's just a consciousness, or their consciousnesses have been raised already. I think this is something that I know Rebecca has touched on previously in talking about this, that having people who are more susceptible to this, and I don't mean susceptible in terms of they're meek or that they are not in control of the situation or even want to have this happen. I just mean that they have the ability to even conduct these conversations, whether they are telepathic or verbal. And moving on to something else that had come up is we have had several discussions here about consciousness, nonverbal communication, but there's always those things that we need to look at from a science standpoint, and that which can be replicated, that which can be shown as quote unquote proof of these experiences and these contacts that have happened. I know when we were talking off camera prior to this, we were discussing a certain bit of evidence that has come up recently regarding your aunt and how that compares very favorably to other evidence that has turned up in the contact community when people have been able to actually gather physical trace evidence of a particular contact. And wondering if you could go into that and discuss that with us here, as apparently there's a connection between your aunt, an abductee from South America, I believe, and believe it or not, a very well hidden, hardly known tribe of individuals in northern China. So if you could, how do all these things tie together?
This is important, and it's really great that scientists are continuing to search for evidence in the Betty and Barney Hill case. And there has been a lot of analysis done on my aunt's dress over the past several years since I wrote with Stanton Friedman, Captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. It's going to go into second publication and will be released in April with an update on a lot of new scientific evidence that I'm really excited about. But one of the things that chemist Phyllis Budinger did when she did the analysis on the powdery substance on my Aunt Betty's dress is to also send parts of the dress over to Australia for DNA analysis. And it came back that Betty had Chinese DNA on the shoulder of her dress. So the question is, how did that Chinese DNA get there? And is this DNA from the non-human entities? And Betty and Barney described those entities as having an Asian appearance. Now, we have to think about the work of Bill Chalker from Australia, who worked on a very important case that had to do with the hair of the alien, where there were two women who came into the room of the experiencer and had sexual relations with him. And one of them left a strand of hair on his body. That strand of hair was analyzed in a laboratory, and there was DNA from a very rare Chinese section of the Chinese population, and also from the Basque population, which was very interesting. Now, on the DNA on Betty's dress, they did not find Basque population, but what they did find is DNA from a segment in China of individuals who are the blonde Chinese. They have blonde hair and blue eyes. So I thought that was very interesting. I contacted Bill Chalker to see if we could get a scientist to compare specifically the DNA on Betty's dress and on the strand of hair. In his case, I have not received a reply yet that, he said that it would take some work to look into it. So I don't have an answer to that right now, but it's very interesting, to wonder, well, are these non-human entities originally from this planet? And did they move on too? So, I've always thought for a long time, if they're producing hybrids, how can they do this if our DNA is different? Have they developed some kind of gene splicing process where they could introduce their DNA into ours? Or are they compatible with our DNA? And, so the question remains unanswered, but I think that it's extremely important that we continue with this scientific research because a lot can be found. There's a woman here in the United States that I worked with in hypnosis. Denise Stoner and I investigated her case where there was a 4-foot tall reptilian entity, reptilian humanoid, who entered her bedroom one night. She was in a great deal of pain. She was suffering from a problem with her bowel and was going to have surgery. The reptilian introduced something that was warm. She felt heat, and then she was healed. And Denise and I spoke to her, and Denise said, well, take a swab so that maybe someday we will be able to find a geneticist who will be able to do DNA testing to find out what this is. And so she did this, and it took a few years. But finally, there was a DNA analysis done on that swab. And what they discovered was the DNA was from a South American reptile who was closest to humans in its genetic makeup. And so the scientists ended up saying, well, perhaps there is a reptilian humanoid, because that's what this DNA analysis points to. So
it's amazing when you look at it that I know one of the things that I've personally been interested in for a long time is something that is acronymed as UU parts, out of place archaeological pieces and findings. And you really couldn't find two more out of place cultures than blondes living in China and the Basque population of Spain and Portugal area, where there is no connection from either one of them to anything, to any of the surrounding communities from an anthropological standpoint. There's you look at them and go, how did they get there? How did the Basque get there? How did these blonde Chinese come to be in that place? And it also touches on, as you said, the genetic connection that could potentially exist between the entities and us, or even new to me that hearing something like that with a 4-foot reptilian leaving a DNA trace behind. As we go further on all of this, it's amazing that what we can find, and the importance of maintaining any evidence that might be gathered from somebody who has had or reported to have had contact, especially extraordinary contact involving a healing, the extraordinary contact going back to your uncle and aunt, Betty and Barney Hill, and actually having the advantage of trace elements being left behind, whether it be the powder, whether it be the hair, and so forth. That, this is really groundbreaking that we're hearing right now, that there are going to be things like this that have been gathered throughout the years that are now, with the advances of science, that we're able to at least potentially explain some of this. Victor, it's just amazing that we're seeing and hearing this kind of thing here from Kathleen today. That
it is indeed groundbreaking. Yeah. I guess what you're alluding to, both Kathleen and Chris, right now, is the whole idea of. I know Kathleen's depended on some scientific analysis of this stuff, and my question has been all the way along: is there's one thing for us to look at it from a scientific point of view, but how long do we think that it'll take for mainstream science to move into this whole realm? And I know, Rebecca, you have a few questions about scientific validation in the mainstream about this issue.
As I read your book, Kathleen, and you talked in your book about proof of experience, proof of validation, those early chapters. And I was just wondering whether or not we have, number one, the science to validate at this point, and whether or not it's going to be, we need a new science like John Mack talked about. Or my idea is that, do we as experiencers need to bring in the new science and the new technology to explain ourselves. That would be the route that the Institute for Exoconsciousness is taking. But just as a side comment to that, I just think this whole discussion of DNA and these differing human DNAs, what does that say about what's happening in terms of transhumanism and synthetic biology, the whole change in human DNA that's coming through synthetic biology? But that's certainly a different discussion, but that could be another program that we're just now beginning to see unveiled. Experiences bringing in the science.
Well, I'm very pleased now that some brave scientists are actually taking all of this seriously. They've seen enough evidence to know that UFOs are real, and they, through people who have actually been collecting evidence and having that evidence analyzed, realizing that there are all sorts of things that we can investigate. Now, years and years ago, back when, for example, Betty and Barney had their experience, no one was even interested in the spots on the trunk of the car that caused a compass needle to spin. I was very interested in that as a teenager. Betty was interested in this because one of our neighbors, who was a physicist, told her to try that, to see if there was a magnetic field around the car. And yes, there was. And it wasn't up at the front where the battery is. This was on the trunk, where there were shiny spots in the location where they heard the series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk. So as I have begun, from the beginning, analyzing all of the scientific evidence that Betty and Barney had, there was a considerable amount of evidence that could be investigated scientifically. And I've really pushed forward to try to have more science done on this, and not just physical science, but social science as well. And I'm so pleased that physical scientists and also social scientists, most of them have retired, but at least they are seriously involved in analyzing the evidence that we have. And I don't know how long it's going to take scientists from the mainstream to move forward, because it seems to me that back in the 60s, they had more liberty to explore what they wanted to explore than from the time that the lid slammed down shut, and this was completely taboo. You would not advance in your career if you engaged in this kind of thing. And I'm just hoping that the lid is beginning to lift. I think that the knowledge about the ATIP program, that TTSA, and the work that they are doing is opening this up a little bit, and that there are perhaps more mainstream scientists who are at least in the corners or in the back rooms talking about this and doing research quietly. And possibly scratching their head. Move us forward.
Yeah, and possibly scratching their head as to what's going on. It seems to be very difficult to understand it from their perspective, because their background is very limited. That brings me to the point, I look at our panelists and considering myself, we are all of a generation, of an age, I don't want to get into specifics, but we're all born sort of the late 40s, early 50s, whatever. And we've moved through the whole progression of trying to come to grips with what's going on. And the number of researchers like Bud Hopkins and John Mack and the whole array of these researchers. What about the young people that are going through this right now, and the new millennial that they're in? Are they experiencing this? Are you coming to grips with some of these younger people that are expressing these kinds of things, or is this just a phenomenon that we accept as just of our generation? Where do these young people fit in, if they do at all?
There are children now who are having these experiences, and their parents are also experiencers. So the parents contact me and other members of MUFON's experiencer research team for guidance on how they should talk with their children. We had one child who I believe is 4 years old, who was having these experiences at night. And so the parents said, well, take a picture. If this is happening, take a picture. And this child took several pictures, and they are the most extraordinary photographs, not of grays, but of these sort of, they look like very highly advanced beings, just incredible, intricate work, almost with they're holy. I don't know what they are. So in terms of young people, this is starting with children. With Mary Rodwell's work, we know that many children have very special qualities, and they have light language. They can heal individuals. They are telepathic. They're all the things that experiencers become, and more. They might be able to do telekinesis. They might be able to turn on the microwave with their minds, that sort of thing. So that's very interesting to look at. I haven't taken the time to do that personally because I have so many other research interests going on. But I admire the individuals, the researchers who are doing this. Among young people, I find a dichotomy. We have the experiencers who know that this is going on in their lives. They seem, most of them, better able to cope with this because we have more answers now. But then we have the group who believe that it's all science fiction and it's all just a good story and don't believe that it's real. So, that's what I've been observing.
It's something that, it is interesting that it is apparently going to continue. As you said, that you've got a 4-year-old girl reporting on her experiences. And of course, today, everybody has a cell phone. Even 4-year-old little girls has a cell phone to be able to grab it and take the pictures to document the experience that they might be having, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's amazing. And it makes you think about, okay, as we move ahead in the future here, and Victor aged us all, that we are now getting to that point in time that the creaking that you hear is not my chair, but my knees as I sit here and talk with you. You have to look back and perhaps take a step back into this. And we talk about the experiences, we talk about the individuals, we talk about the people who are having these experiences, and it leads you to take a very philosophical look at it and ask the question, why? Why is this going on? Why are we being contacted? Why are we having these experiences? Why are they doing this to us? It seems as though it's, as with anything, you look at it and you go, there has to be a purpose behind what they are doing. And especially if the contacts as being reported, either consciously or subconsciously, eventually through regression analysis and psychotherapy, that the contactees seem to talk about an examination, whether it's a physical examination, a mental examination, they are going through something. So whoever is examining them and whatever is examining them is doing so apparently to collect data and information. So again, that goes back to a very simple, short question. Why?
Well, I think I can maybe entertain a possible answer to that. And it's something that I got into with Dr. Mack when I visited him at his Harvard office. And he shared with me the fact, alluding to exactly what you're saying, Chris, is that he got the idea or the context from a lot of the experiencers that they were being told that we as a human species are on the threshold of the next step in our evolution. And that whoever these beings are, collectively or individually, they are here, in answer to your question, possibly, they are here to help us take that next step, whatever that next step is, recognizing our consciousness, recognizing the connectivity between all matter and the cosmos. That has not yet been totally accepted by mainstream media, mainstream science, or even just the general public. So I think one of the things we have to look at is the role that these non-human intelligence are playing, is that they are guiding us to this next step. We're standing on the threshold, but humanity being who we are, we're afraid to take that next step. And we've always been reluctant to think of ourselves as something that needs help. We always figured ourselves as being the top of the cosmic heap. We're not. We need help to move forward as spiritual beings and physical beings. So I'm not sure how anyone else would react to that kind of answer to the question why, but I think that helps us move along forward in answer to that question of why and where we're going with this whole idea.
Well, for me, I became very interested in the conversations that they've had, or the downloads of information that they have given to experiencers. And this dates back to 1954, where I was able to acquire information from Admiral Herbert Knowles and Wilbert Smith in the correspondence files that they left behind. And Admiral Knowles' granddaughter gave me the correspondence files. Extraordinarily interesting because it involved a woman from Maine, Frances Swan, and she started to receive telepathic information from non-humans who claimed that they were the captains of gigantic craft who were not far from Earth, and that they were here to assist mankind. And they said that they would not favor one nation over any other, but they would give this technology to every nation. And they were there to help us if we wanted help. And so apparently our government decided that they didn't want help. But the information or the concerns that they expressed were about our use of nuclear weapons, that by detonating thermonuclear weapons, we tear a hole in the fabric between dimensions, and that it goes out to impact the entire universe. So this was a concern that they wanted to give us guidance and admonishment on our use of nuclear weapons. And this has been seen time and time again. I've talked to so many individuals who are the children of nuclear scientists, or the children of military officers, or individuals who are actually active in the military. And they're all being taken and they're all being given this nuclear cautionary information that these entities are not only concerned that we could destroy our planet and all life on our planet through the use of nuclear weapons, but they are also concerned about our environment and our failure to be good stewards to our environment, and that could lead to an environmental collapse. And we already know that UFOs have been over nuclear bases around the United States on the US-Canadian border, in the Soviet Union, where they actually activated the weapons rather than deactivating them. So there is a loud and clear message, and it's continued, not just from the messages that I read between Admiral Herbert Knowles and Wilbert Smith, but continuing to this day.
Kathleen, it's been great having you with us. Is there any more that you can talk to us about with respect to your work and where we can find out more about what you do?
Yes, my website is Kathleen-Marden, MARDEN.com. And all of my 5 books and one of Stanton's books is on sale there, autographed copies. They're also available in all formats at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I am kind of writing another book now. So I'm busy working on that and just learning as much as I can. That's what I continuously do, is to delve deeper scientifically to uncover the evidence. Also on my website, there are several articles that I've written. I also write a blog about 4 times a year. And you can see where I'm going to be speaking also on my website. We don't know for next year. Everything was canceled this year, so that remains to be seen.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being with us. And we'll definitely, this is not a topic that we can cover in just an hour or so. So we will have you back on again. So thank you very much again. Chris, I'll throw it to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen. It's been marvelous having you with us here today. I've learned so much, and thank you for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, and what you think about the future here for all of us and the direction that this could possibly be leading to us. And of course, want to thank our distinguished group of correspondents and panelists. You've been wonderful today, and we look forward to having you all with us when we gather the next time. Before you leave, if you did enjoy today's podcast, please go down and click on that subscribe button here to the New Frontier Network. Hit the like button if you so feel inclined. We appreciate your feedback. We appreciate your comments, and we'd love to bring content to you in the future that is going to be meaningful to us all and will help to drive this discussion ever further forward. Till next time, keep your eyes to the skies. Can't wait to do it again.
You've been listening to the New Frontier Network.